Hello, this is David Moffat on my Rapid Prototyping Design, and here is my 3 portfolio prototypes. The first game is Pizza Time, which is based off the theme of 10 seconds. In this game, you have to make a pizza in 10 seconds based on the customer's orders. You'll be graded on how much you've matched the customer's orders on a scale of F to A. The biggest inspirations for this game is Papa's Pizza and WarioWare. The pizza theme being Papa's Pizza and WarioWare being the 10-second timer, since in WarioWare you are given a short amount of time to finish a task. This game was made in Unity's 2D engine, since I have experience in Unity's 2D engine. Here's a similarity to Papa's Pizza, where you are given a list of requirements which you have to match, and in my case I have given the player an instruction on how the game should be played as well on top of this. Most of the interactions with the game are using a cursor click on function, which allows me to detect when a player is hovering over an object and detect when it's been clicked. The grading system counts how many toppings have been placed based on what button you've been using and when you've been clicking it. So if you click on the mushroom and then start clicking, it'll count them as mushroom clicks, and then when you change it to the pepperoni, count them as pepperoni clicks. The final grading system counts how many clicks have been used on specific toppings and then compares it to the customer's requirements at the end of the game. Based on how much you've matched the customer's order, it will give you a grade of F to A, F being the worst and A being the best. There are 4 customers which will be randomly given at the start of the game, and each one is a different difficulty, so it's more RNG on what you'd get difficulty wise. As well, it adds a little bit of replayability since the game's only 10 seconds, and giving a player the same customer over and over again would be kind of repetitive. For my second prototype, it was set on the theme of one button, and in my case I made a VR game where you have to find one button inside of a room. Using Unreal Engine's VR template, I was able to make a VR environment of a room where objects are placed around, and the player has to move these objects to try and find the button inside of the room. The grab function is just using the VR controller's triggers to parent the object that the player is hovering over with the hand. One of the things that I would have liked to do with the grab function is to have weighted objects. Here's an example of Blades and Sorcery's grab function, where when you pick up objects, the object is given weight and it resists the hand's pull, so it doesn't look like it's weightless. It's weightless and gives it a more realistic feel in the VR game. Most of the objects, like the computer, the keyboard and the table, were brought off Sketchfab, where most of the other objects were brought off Megascan. The window view was made through a HDRI map to add more depth to the background and make the VR realistic. With the scaling of the game, it was much easier since it was in a VR environment, and it's much easier to understand what right scale you should give objects, since you're standing right next to them in the environment. Another function that I would have liked to add to the game would have been breakability, since most of the objects you can chuck around, and it would have added a more sandboxy feel to the environment. The final prototype is a two-person perspective zombie survival game, where the second-person perspective comes from the zombies which surround you. This game was inspired by Alpha Beta Gamer, who made the second-person zombie survival game. I made this game second-person perspective to fit the theme of subverting expectations, since most games you would play first-person shooters and third-person shooters, and there ain't any real second-person shooter games. One of the main reasons is second person is quite hard to control, since the camera isn't directly controlled by you and is controlled by a second person, so you have to work with clever camera work to make it a more coherent gameplay. One of the ways I did this is by having a zombie follow you around, so when you get near him it will turn to his perspective, and any other time you are not near him it will turn to this perspective of zombies behind gates around corners, so then you at least have a camera looking at you at any point. This allows the player to see at any angle. One of the things that I did for this game is gave it a retro style feel, since it reminded me of the old Resident Evil games. So one of the things that I did first was add post-processing effects like the pixelating filter, which takes the resolution of the camera and lowers it and then upscales it so it has less pixels on the screen and like spreads them around so you can see the pixels more. Another thing that I did is I used a cartoon post-processing effect, which takes the overall depth of shading for darkness and converts it into two different types, dark and light, and then set them to set colors, so the darker parts are still visible but are just a little bit less saturated, and the lighter parts are much more saturated and much more lighter, so it looks like the game has a much less complicated shading game, which the Resident Evil old games would have had. All the assets that I've used from stores and websites are listed down below in the video's description as references, so then you can have a look at what things I've been using. Thanks for watching my demonstration of the 3 prototypes that I've made, which were Pizza Time, which was on the set theme of 10 seconds, the Button Game in VR, which was themed on one button, and Subverting Expectations, which was a second person zombie survival game which didn't really have a title, but let's just say it's called The Zombie Game.